Hey, it's William McCoy here with the Return Podcast and my co-host Asia. Asia, introduce yourself.
Asia Kirkendall, CFO at Karuti.
Awesome.
All right, so for our topic today, you guys might have seen these headlines floating around these last few weeks, but we are talking about the 300,000 black women who either left the workforce or have been pushed out of the workforce in the 3 months when they ran this report. And so what we're referencing here, just to show you, because we like receipts around here, is this Forbes article, okay, where they reported on this at the beginning of August. So when we're talking about economic risk and just how this affects not just black women, but the economy as a whole, I feel like this is kind of like a symptom, I feel like, yes, we've been seeing the global economy, the market changes, all these different shifts and things happening. And so generally people are kind of paying attention to see what we do next. But because these layoffs, closing DEI, whatever the reason, because black women were the first ones affected at mass, I feel like people kind of aren't paying attention to what's coming down the pipeline or what this is a symptom of. So if black women are the first to feel it, how long after before it affects the rest of the economy? And then most importantly, what is the solution here if jobs are no longer available that people need?
Yeah, I mean, Asia, it's tough. Watching that article come out and knowing some friends who lost their job. I remember being on TikTok and seeing a friend of mine who said she had just lost her job. Now, she was also an influencer, so she was kind of able to, go full soul into that. But obviously that's a hit, right? And you think about the effects of that, that many women losing jobs, that's a big chunk of the middle class for blacks. And in a lot of cases, they were the sole breadwinners for their families, right?
Yeah.
So if you're talking about 300 capable women, educated black women who can't find space in America's workforce, then maybe they're not the problem. Maybe it's the pipeline itself. And so the question comes to, like, how do we build new pipelines?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I know you don't necessarily like when people answer a question with the question, but what pipelines are we talking about here? Because if we're talking about the regular workforce job, getting a W-2 pipeline, that's one question. Or if we're talking about the pipeline to income generation in general. And
Well, I'm gonna tell you, you know how I feel about, I've been an entrepreneur for a while,
yeah.
right? And so it's difficult for me to see a path outside of entrepreneurship. It's really, really difficult out here for everybody, but specifically, I'm seeing a lot of my black friends and just people online having a really tough time finding work. And so when I'm talking about pipelines, I'm talking about building new pipelines specifically in entrepreneurship
yeah.
around ownership of companies that are black,
Yeah.
that are then hiring people who are black,
Yeah.
right? In order to fix what we have lost, which I believe is going to continue to happen
Yeah.
in this system, right? So that's the pipeline I'm talking about, building companies that then hire black people,
Yeah.
train black people to then go out there and be other entrepreneurs, or just train great executives and CEOs or middle class management,
Yeah.
or whatever you want to be, but having places where you are less susceptible to risk because of the color of your skin
Yeah.
versus what has happened and has been happening for a long time.
Okay, that's good because I feel like what the opportunity we have right now is to talk about, like you said, entrepreneurship and how that creates jobs. So I feel like in a lot of conversations about entrepreneurship and business ownership, people, whether they know it or not, kind of pit one against the other, like, oh, job, W-2, or business ownership, as if they can't exist together. And so it's kind of like picking up where we left off on our last episode, talking about, the role that corporations play. And if these corporations don't align, they aren't behaving in a way that aligns with your personal values, doesn't matter who you're working for. You just want to work for a company that's going to be feeding into the things you care about, align with your values, with your community. And so to your point, I don't believe everybody's meant to be a founder or a business owner. We need middle management. We need executives. We need, all the different levels for the mission to get complete. And as long as you wake up every day and you are doing the things that you love to do, you working towards your goals, your personal goals, the greater goals, that's what success, that's how one of the ways I would define success. And so you don't necessarily need to start a business to feel that success and fulfillment. But I think the conversation we're having is important just for people to realize that having a job is not bad. It's how do you feel whenever you're going to that job, and ultimately, what is that company doing for the society at large?
And that's exactly it, right? Like it doesn't necessarily matter if you are working for somebody, or you start out and become your own entrepreneur, or you're working while you're trying to become an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
But there should be a pipeline, a path for you to be able to do that without the worries that so many of us face simply because of the color of our skin.
Yeah.
And so that's where the education around entrepreneurship and ways to get your company started or funded. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You can go out and get funding from an SBA loan, which is up, right? SBA loans are up, and specifically amongst African Americans or blacks, right? But one of the issues that they face is that they don't have what is called patient capital. And that patient capital allows you time for growth.
Yeah.
And so without that time to grow, you take in a loan, right? They want that loan back. From personal experience, I can tell you. You get a loan from the SBA. They want you to start paying on that loan within 45 to 60 days, right?
60 days.
That means that yes, you should start paying back that loan. Like you're gonna get a loan coupon from them within that time period, saying, hey, look, maybe maximum 90 days if they really are kind, but typically you get the money,
Yeah.
they want you to start paying back on that loan.
Yeah.
Well, the difference between that and being able to get funding outside of that, where we see a lot of these companies and startups being able to get money, is that they get what is called patient capital, right? And that patient capital is time for them to grow from the seed to a more mature company.
Yeah.
So that they have revenue
Yeah.
that can match. Well, if you don't have that, then you basically have to start off from zero, maybe asking some friends and family or save up some time to get some money. And again, it puts us behind the eight ball when it comes to our counterparts.
Yeah.
So crowdfunding allows for that patient capital
Yeah.
to be put into place, right? People are investing in you. They may not necessarily expect a return. Typically, that return, typically you can do what is called like a convertible note, which is like a loan, right? A debt. And then that debt can convert into equity for people. But that debt typically doesn't become mature for 2 years. So it means that you're not paying that loan back to whoever your investors are for 2 years. And in reality, 90% of the time, it's going to turn into an equity model, and then they're investing in you. So which then gives you more time to try to build that company up. And you need that time. You need that flexibility. You need that patient capital.
Yes. Man, I never heard of it described that way, patient capital, but I love it because it reminds me of when I was in real estate and we did our first fix and flip deal, and we got a hard money lender. And so for real estate, a big theme when we were starting was the chicken and the egg. Like they want you to have experience to give you a loan, but to get a loan, you got to have a couple deals under your belt. So like, okay, how do I do this? And so the way we did it, this is where the financial strategy comes in, is we got the hard money loan, but to your point, they want you to start making payments right away on that. And we're going to need at least 3 months to flip this house. So when we got the loan, I made sure to carve out a portion of that, and we reserved that just for the loan payments, so that we wouldn't, put ourselves against the wall by having to pay contractors to do the deal and pay loan at the same time, and then be, shooting ourselves in the foot because we didn't plan ahead. And especially as first-time investors or early-stage investors, like you're saying, needing that time for the patience and for the seed to grow, the institutions that's lending don't always give you that time, so you have to figure out a way to build your own, buffer in there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that you said and epitomized exactly what ends up happening. you know, you need some time to flip the property, but right away the hard money lenders want you to start paying back,
Yeah.
right? And so I think patient capital is the way to go
Yeah.
because we see it work with a bunch of other companies out there, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the way for the future for us as far as getting into entrepreneurship and building these pipelines and building these companies that we absolutely need to be able to compete.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that crowdfunding allows people to do, equity crowdfunding specifically, is that it allows a founder or an entrepreneur to go out and say, look, I want to test the waters of does this work, right? And typically the people who are going to be investing in your company are going to be people who are from your community or at least look like you, may something about you may resonate with them, right? And so that's your market, right, as well, right? So your investor could also be your customer, right?
Yes.
And that's not something that typically happens. And so crowdfunding, specifically equity crowdfunding, allows you to be able to test your idea first on would people invest in me, this idea, okay? And then would those same people end up using my product? And if they're investing in you, they're typically going to invest in you because they see your product as a product that they would typically use.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. Back to investing to what you know or what aligns with your values. Okay, so what I wanted to do when we talk about patient capital, I wanted to take a second to kind of dive into some of the terminology that we brought up. So when we're talking about debt and equity, you know, we've been talking about that and speaking about them as if they're different because there are, but I want to talk about exactly what makes them different and how that relates to, you know, what we're doing here at Karuti. So debt, as you guys know, just like a loan, if somebody lends you money, you promise to pay them an interest rate in return for lending you that money. So that is a debt loan. It is a debt note that they gave you, and you promise to pay back interest for that. Now, equity on the other sense, it could be the same person, but instead of them giving you the money and you promising to pay interest on that money, instead they're giving you that money and it's going to be a stake in the company or a stake in the product that you're building. So instead of getting a percent interest in return for equity, they're getting a percent of the profits. And so let's say, again, going back to patient capital, let's say you got an equity investor and let's say you're not profitable for 2 years. An equity investor is going to understand that because if you're not profitable, they're not going to expect any return yet. And so they're going to be patient and wait that 2 years because they know as soon as you turn profitable, they start to get a split of all of those profits that come through. And so with what Will was talking about with the convertible note, essentially the way we're designing this crowdfunding opportunity is we're going to start out as and Will jump in if I'm misleading us here, but it's going to start out as a debt investment originally, and then once the company hits a certain milestone, it's going to convert into an equity stake in that company.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it works, right? So you have a good combination of both, right? You have a promissory note, but then you also have that equity piece that's tied in there as well, which is super important to so many of us. And then there's another part that we do that we'll talk about in later shows to really cement your equity investment and turn down some of the buffers. So you guys are gonna have to stick around for the next episodes that come up as we go into further how we try to de-risk. Now, let's be clear that none of this is considered advice. Again, visit SEC and FINRA. Please look at risk when it comes to investment. All investments involve risk. But what we're here to do is to give information about that, about crowdfunding specifically as a vehicle, and then also talk about other topics, right? Like things that are related to us as a people and find fixes of not begging for a fix, but laying our own bricks and then cementing it with our own companies and our own ventures.
Yes.
So stick with us. Thanks for having us. Thanks for being with us. And we'll talk soon.
Peace, y'all.
Bye.